If you think about a character in the Bible that has a lot of faith and even has a lot of prayer life, you may consider the character of King David. And we're going to be talking a little bit about David and his faith and his prayer life and how we can teach our children to have that kind of faith today. And I just want to say thank you and welcome to the show. This is the Coffee and Kidlit Show, where we talk about imaginative stories and get into real conversations about children's books. And today I have children's book author Janice Blanchett on the show. Janice is a Christian children's book author, and she's put out four books
Cool.
now, I believe,
Mm-hmm.
that kind of reimagine those classic Bible stories. And so we're going to talk today about number three in her collection of books. This is The Shepherd and the Squirrel. And Janice, please, first of all, thank you for being on the show.
Sure.
Yeah.
Thank
Can
you.
you just give us a little introduction of yourself?
I'm a wife. I've been married to my husband Mark for 35 years. We have 5 children that are grown. Two grandsons, very rambunctious grandsons. We love them to death. And then I have a 6-pound grand dog named Cooper. Um, and he's almost as rambunctious as the boys. But we love him too. He's part of the family.
And is Cooper the
Uh,
one we might be hearing during the show?
Hopefully not. He just went under the covers, so maybe he's taking his morning nap.
Yeah, okay. Okay.
um, I I was born and raised in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and lived there until we moved here 30 years ago. And I love it here. I love the seasons, and it's a whole different ball game in the fall and the spring. I love it's just amazing. Um, but yeah, my background is in journalism and children's ministry. And
Okay.
so it kind of makes sense now that I'm writing children's books.
Yeah.
Um,
Now, was that
it's
journalism tied to children's ministry, or was it two different
no,
things? Okay.
no, it was that was my major in college, and I wrote for newspapers. And um, then when had my family, got married and had my family, I put it on the back burner and wanted to raise my kids. And that was around the time we moved out here. And so I, you know, I taught at the schools where my kids went so that I could be with, on the same schedule. And then I got a job at the church full time in children's ministry. And I did that for 16 years. And so it was a great way to keep my kids involved at church, whether they
Yeah.
liked it or not sometimes. But, you know,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Um, yeah, I grew up in a Christian home and our family was very involved. We were in the church every time the doors were open, so I'm used to that growing up. So I think it's a great way to, um, yeah, to raise your kids and
Hmm.
be in the church and involved in ministry and volunteering
Right.
as much as you
They
possibly can.
learned,
That's great.
absolutely. They learned how to serve.
Yeah.
Um, and, I hear they give me a hard time now because I used to make them dress up as the Easter bunny at different, whatever I needed. I'd be like, okay, I need you to do this. And so um,
Yeah.
I've got pictures to
Yeah.
use, when I need to.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Um, well, this for those that might be watching this episode, it's a little bit different because I've actually had a lot of Christian children's authors on the show, but I believe Janice, you're the first one that we've actually talked about a Christian story. So be a little more open about our faith, and I'm excited about that because I actually want to have more faith-based stories on the show. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm really glad to have you on.
Okay.
Um, So just give us a little bit of history of why you decided to start writing children's books and what that looked like.
Honestly, I never would have thought I would be in this place. Um, I really had put writing on the back burner and I was done, because I was so busy with my life. Um, but during when I was working at the church in the children's ministry, doing a children's Christmas program, um, one it was about the birth of Jesus, obviously. And the costumes, we had all different age kids up there on the stage. And the smaller kids, we like 4 years old, I think, we had them as stars. And so we had cut out foam yellow stars, and they just wore those on their heads. And one of the kids' stars kept falling off, and he'd pick it up and put it on, and it would fall off. And, he did that several times. And finally, he just left it on the floor. And I remember exactly where I was in the church when that happened. And I thought, the star that lost its twinkle. That would be a really cool children's book. And, have it be based on the birth of Jesus, and the stars, the Star of Bethlehem. And that was over 20 years ago, okay? And that's
Yeah.
how much it was on the back burner. And um, fast forward to 2 years ago, and I was at a conference for work in Orlando. And one of my good friends that I worked with at the church, because I had started with a nonprofit after I left the church. Um, she's a best-selling novelist. She writes fantasy books, and they're really good. And so she was looking for a personal assistant. And so I said, part-time, what the heck? I could use some more money. So I emailed her, and she was like, of course, I'm going to hire you. So I had no idea what she did. I didn't know anything about publishing. And she began to just teach me different things, and I was like, wow, you can do this. And we talked about my idea of that star that lost its twinkle. And she said, you need to write it. And I was like, she said, I'll help you. And so she kind of pointed me in the right direction, and I wrote it. And then she helped, walked me through the whole publishing. And you did too. You were instrumental in formatting that book. And I was flabbergasted when it was all. I was like, that was on my bucket list, but I never thought it would be checked off. Um, and it just seems like the ideas keep coming, and I'm just continuing to do it. Um, One of the main reasons is I think there's a need for just wholesome books that kids can read that don't have an agenda, you know, just something that, and I use my grandsons as testers. I'll read it to them even before it's finished sometimes. And they're like, yeah, I like that. Or no, you need to do this. And so I've got a bunch of critics in my house that listen to this over and over and over and over. I don't know if you do that to your wife, but
Yeah.
my poor husband, he's like, pauses the TV and he's like, okay, read it again. But I just feel like that's what I'm supposed to be doing right now is I have a full-time job, and I do this when late at night or early in the morning. I get up, and um, I just feel like it's gonna, you know, maybe bring Bible stories to light, bring the Bible stories to kids that have never heard them. Um, and at the end of every book, I put the actual scripture where they can find that Bible story, because I don't, I want to point them to the Bible. Um, I don't change the story. My husband is like my Bible consultant. He's read the Bible a ton, like twice a year he reads the Bible through.
Mhm.
So he's my own personal consultant, and I'm like, I don't want to change it. So tell me if there's one little thing off, you know. So um that's just very important to me at this point. Is I mean, that's my whole mission, is to um bring kids to back to the Bible, because they're really not being directed that way a lot of times, you know,
Yeah.
especially if they're not going to church. I mean, I have someone, that a very good friend of mine, whose granddaughter read my first book, and she didn't know what Bethlehem was. And so my friend got to have a conversation with her, and that made it all worth it for me, because I want those conversations to happen, you know, whether it be between a grandparent and their grandchild, or whatever, you know. I just Those conversations are important.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really like how your books, they're not named after these well-known Bible stories. Like
Mhm.
this one that we'll be talking about today is not called David and Goliath.
Mhm.
The Star That Lost Its Twinkle is not called The Birth of Jesus. It's not in your
Mhm.
face Christian
Right.
um, publishing, and yet you kind of introduce it. I was thinking about this earlier today. By the way, it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon here, or a little
Oh
after that.
gosh.
So I've had a little more time to think about things than you
Yes.
have. But your books are based on nonfiction stories. As Christians, we believe that these stories actually happened, that they are
Mhm.
truly historical stories. But you twist them in a way that makes it, I guess, friendly for kids and introduces kind of a different perspective, I would say,
Mhm.
to those stories. So it's kind of hard to say, is this a nonfiction story or is it a fictional story? Because of course we don't know that David had a friend that was a squirrel,
He
so
could have.
he could have, right. Um, but anyways, I just really love that sort of soft introduction. It
Mhm.
kind of starts as this fictional story that kind of softly transitions into the actual story that we know and love from the Bible. So that's just
I
so
had
yeah.
someone just leave a review recently that said my stories connect the dots between life and Bible stories.
Mm,
Um, and it gives kids, you know, a reason to maybe want to delve into it more, and to read the real story, you know, because mine is not true, but it's just from my imagination, you know. I mean, it's not the real story, but there is a real story.
right, right. You mentioned that we need more wholesome Christian or wholesome children's books out there. Why do you say that? What, thinking of the time we're in right
Right.
now.
I just feel like kids need to be allowed to be kids, you know, and having raised 5 kids, um, I was very particular about what they read, you know, especially in the formative years. Um, I get a hard time from them now, because I didn't let them read Harry Potter right away, you
Mhm.
know, my husband, who is an avid reader, he's like, you know, there's a lot of, I mean, it's everywhere. I'm gonna read this book and see if what it is, what it's like. And he read it in one day. I mean, he was like, that's the best fantasy book I've ever read, you know?
Mhm.
And so to me, I want kids to be kids. You know, that's the main thing. Don't put heavy things on them that they don't need to handle at that age, you know? And
Mhm.
um I don't know. I mean, it's like do you let them watch horror movies at that age? You know, I mean, you got to be careful. You get one chance at raising your children. And
Yeah.
I took it very seriously because once that's gone, it's gone. And then it's their responsibility. But you know, you gotta offer, or at least that's important to me, is to offer books that are going to make them better themselves, and read, maybe read the Bible, you know, because it's not, the Bible is getting pushed further and further to the back of the shelf, you know, that was an important part of my growing up. Even, you know, um, the Bible was never sugar coated. Like, the stories were not sugar coated, and I've had a hard time with some people saying, um, you can't make your books violent, you know, even though the stories are violent. So in The Shepherd and the Squirrel, I stopped short of him cutting Goliath's head off, and I was like, that's a little too much.
Yeah.
You know, but it's, you just, I don't know. It's there's a fine line, I think. And I just try to stay on the side where it's it's not going to affect the kids, you know. I mean, I want them to think for themselves, but I want them to think for themselves. I want them to read something, you know, and then say, "Oh, I want to learn more about this
Mhm.
later," you know. I don't know.
Right.
It's a tough thing, but I just think it's important. I'm not in my I'm doing it whole with my whole heart. I don't have a secret agenda. I'm just doing this because I feel like the Lord has called me to this. And I mean, He's opened so many doors. When I look back on my life, I feel like I've been prepared for this moment. And you know, I truly believe He orders our steps and He puts us in the right place at the right time. Because I mean, I can tell you so many stories of, I when I look back now and I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't know why I did that, but now I do. You know, I don't I wasn't happy that I was doing that, but now I know why I did that, and why, you know, how it prepared me for now. And I don't know, that's how I feel about it.
Sure. Yeah. Well, we've been talking a little bit about it, but the Shepherd and the Squirrel, again, is number three in your collection of stories that you have out now. Tell us about this story, what it's about. Give us a little introduction about that.
Okay. It's about an unlikely friendship between a nutty squirrel named Sammy, um, and a young shepherd named David. The squirrel likes to collect stones instead of nuts, um, and the stones are exactly the kind of stones that David uses with his sling to protect his flock from, you know, predators. Um, and together they, you know, become good friends, and they go on an adventure, and find themselves in the middle of a battle between, you know, with Goliath. And it's 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 just, it's, to me, it was fun to see the progression of their friendship, from, you know, the first moment and him showing David his stones, to Sammy deciding to go with him to take supplies to his brothers on the battlefield, without David knowing. He just didn't want him to go by himself. Um, and so even he was kind of shocked when David just kind of walked past all the other soldiers to fight Goliath. You know, it's like he didn't hesitate. And I wanted that to be a highlight in the book, because who does that? I mean,
Mm.
you have to be very confident in your faith and in your skill. Um, and he trusted God. He knew that God was going to take care of him. So he had no fear at all. And that everybody was shocked. And I just wanted that to be like, wow, he walked past all of the trained soldiers who were too afraid to do it themselves, and he did it. That was the cool part.
Yeah, and we're going to talk a little bit about David and what kind of character he really was. And I think lots of times children's books are a little um, misinformative about the character because you do want to kind of, I guess,
Mhm.
soften the character a little bit. But
Yeah.
anyways, what inspired this story specifically?
Well, I was finishing up my second book, and I was sitting. I have a big picture window right here, and I was working, and all of a sudden, the squirrel jumped on the window. And I've got pictures. It was the craziest thing I've ever seen in my life. And he was probably a foot away from my head. And I was like, "What?" And he just sat there for like 5 minutes. He didn't move. So I thought, "Okay." I have a lot of trees around my house. We have, a big yard, and we have a lot of squirrels, but it never, they never really got my attention, and this one did. And I had been looking for a character for the next book, and I thought, "Well, this is it. Okay, you just auditioned and you got the job." Um, yeah, so that was and, I use a lot when I write. I use people, places, and things. I just take ideas from different things, and, um so that's what so I went out in my backyard after that, and I would just sit and write and just watch the squirrels and what they did, and, researched them a little bit. And um it's it was an easy choice this time for sure.
How would you describe David at this age in his life? Eventually he goes on to be the king of Israel.
Mhm.
But at this point in his life,
I would say he was faithful. He had a relationship with God. Um and he trusted God. He was brave for someone that age, um, to protect a flock of sheep and kill bears and lions or whatever. I mean, that's a brave kid right there. Um, I would say he was very obedient. He was an obedient son to his father, um, because something I researched that I thought was really interesting was being the youngest in the family, tending the sheep became his job. And while the other brothers, several of them went to battle, but he had to take care of the sheep. Um, and if his father said, go take supplies to the battlefield, that's what he did. So he had a lot of good qualities. Um, I would want my teenager to be just like him, very,
exactly.
very loyal, very trustworthy, dependable, and a good friend.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's kind of what I was talking a little bit about. Kind of this picture of David seems to be a little off in a lot of stories of David, especially when he faces Goliath, because we always picture him as this small, frail little
Mhm.
kid. Yet here he is defending his sheep against
Mhm.
bears and lions, and he may have been the youngest of his brothers, and arguably, you know, the smallest of his brothers, but
Mm.
he definitely wasn't weak.
Mm-mm.
He goes on to be this huge hero in battle.
Mhm.
And so it's just kind of an interesting thing. We always see this picture of this small kid up against this giant of a
Right.
man named
Right.
Goliath, and I don't know that it was quite so accurate as that. Um, yeah, I think David. He certainly had a lot of faith to
Mhm.
go up against Goliath when
Oh,
no
sure.
other um, trained soldier would do it.
Mhm.
So yeah, it's just really really interesting, and I think it's such a great character to use as a model for our own kids,
Uh-huh.
and how to teach them. Um,
Absolutely.
so you you have this you have this page. I'm gonna show it here. If it'll come back up. Yeah, this is the spread in your story where
Mhm.
David is walking along and he's praying, and it says along the way David prayed. He prayed for his flock. He prayed for his brothers on the battlefield. He prayed for God's protection. And then it goes in that he finds out that the squirrel has been following him.
Mhm.
Um, what do you think is the lesson here for young readers?
I I really wanted to impress on prayer, and that even though he's by himself, or you're by yourself, you can pray. You can pray. I pray all day long sometimes. It's just if I need direction, if I need um, an idea, or, praying for your friends, praying for your brothers on the battlefield, that kind of thing. Um, I want I mean, I hope my kids were taught to be quick to pray, um, because, I mean, that's our hope, that God hears our prayer, um, and also that scene is a big friendship scene, because it's where Sammy was like, "I didn't want you to go by yourself."
Mm,
And to me, I wanted to show that bond, that they had a good friendship in this book. It's fictitious, but they loved each other, and he wanted to go and help him, be a help. Um, and that's a good friend to have.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Um, so us as parents raising our kids, obviously this is a children's book, and it's a great book for parents to read to their kids. Um, what do you think we as parents can do to sort of give or teach our kids to have the kind of faith that David has?
Well, I think you have to be consistent in your walk with your own walk, like, I mean, obviously we weren't perfect parents, but it was our priority to raise our kids in the church and a Christian home, and to be consistent and to teach them it's important to serve others. It's important to pray, and it's important to be a good friend, to serve. um, and I think it's, you know, for me too, it's being present in your kids' lives and not just taking them to church and letting them go. It's like
Mm,
we talked all the way home from church, about what happened, and um, it's, keep them involved in church. It's important. It was very important to me and my husband, and the way we raised them. Does that answer your question?
yeah, absolutely,
It's
and I
it's
think
kind of
you're Yeah, it's I think you're right on the ball there because you know we think about school as it's school and the teachers that educate our kids, and a lot of
Mhm.
people will send their kids or take their kids to church for the very same reason. It's the
Mhm.
church's job to teach their kids about
Right.
the Bible and about faith, and really for both school and our faith, we need to be reflecting that at
Mhm.
home, um,
Exactly.
and carrying those same lessons throughout the day, throughout the week, throughout the year, and living it out for ourselves.
Mhm.
I think you're exactly right. Such a great lesson for parents. It's if you're depending on the church to do the job for you, then you're really missing the mark. Um, yeah.
Exactly. And as a working at the church, we saw that a lot
Mm.
where and yeah, it was good that the kids were at church, but once they leave, what are they seeing? What are they doing? I mean, you've got to follow up after church. It can't just be once a week thing.
Yeah, and of course, we're not perfect.
No.
Even as believers who have grown up in church and live out that kind of lifestyle, we're not perfect. We've all sinned and
Oh,
fallen short of
sure.
God's glory. So,
Oh,
so
sure.
we have to make that choice daily to make the right decisions and to follow our faith on a daily basis.
Mhm.
Um, what, Janice, is your favorite psalm? Now, the book of Psalms, just for those who aren't familiar, the book of Psalms is the largest book in the Bible, and a good percentage of it was actually written by David. Um, a lot of it is like almost like songs and praise songs,
Right.
very positive, yet there are many that are show a different side where it was all about the struggles that David went through, but at the same time, it seems like he always turns back to praise. What's your
Mhm.
favorite?
That was a hard one, because, I mean, I don't study the Psalms, but I have favorite verses. Once I started looking through it, I was like, "Oh, yeah, that's one of my favorites." And obviously the 23rd Psalm is powerful in so many ways. Um,
Mhm.
I like Psalm 139:14. I praise you because I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. That was one that we used a lot in children's ministry because, God doesn't make mistakes and everybody is made by him.
Yeah.
Um, Psalm 119:105 is thy word is a lamp to my feet and a light to my path. And I have highlighted that in my Bible 40 years ago, because I want him to direct my steps, and to me that is why I'm here today. And so I would say that one is my all-time favorite.
Yeah. Yeah. Psalm 23 kind of, I think it is probably the most well known
Mhm.
psalm. The Lord is my shepherd, shall not want. And if you had asked me a year ago, I probably wouldn't have said that was my favorite. I probably would have chosen another one. But recently, I've kind of dove into that chapter a little bit more, and its reflection on the relationship between the shepherd and his
Mhm.
flock, and what
Mhm.
that means, and just from that chapter really associated that with our relationship with God, and yeah, it's really beautiful if you take the time to read through it
Mhm.
and think about us as the sheep.
Mhm.
And
Right.
the Bible says that Jesus is the good shepherd, or calls himself that. I am the good shepherd. So
Mhm.
yeah, really good um, relationship or analogy there. So Janice and I have been talking about her book, The Shepherd and the Squirrel, and you'll be able to find the link to this book on Amazon down in the description below, and I'll also have links to all of Janice's books. But I just want to take a minute to say that the Coffee and Kidlit Show is really all about interviewing um, my fellow children's book authors, whether they're Christian authors or authors that of books that raise awareness to different disabilities, um, different causes, and also just some fun stories. And it's just been really exciting to be able to talk to these authors and really get into some deep, real conversations with all of them. And right now, I'll soon be scheduling new shows for the fall of 2023. So if you are a children's book author and you're interested in being on the show, please reach out to me and maybe we can set that up. I've got some really fun things in store for the rest of this year and moving forward. I'm actually working on something right now that is kind of exciting for me, and that's that I'm taking as many episodes as I can and reducing them down, editing and sort of polishing the transcript into a small magazine or a digest, you could call it,
Mhm.
and adding some pictures from the author and the first issue of what I'm calling the C&K digest will be coming out soon. So I'm really excited about that.
Wow.
So be
That's
looking for
cool.
that, and maybe I can have Janice in one of those digests soon. And
Sure.
so if you really enjoy this show, please be on the lookout for that soon. And if you haven't subscribed, please hit that subscribe button and help me out. I really want to grow the audience for this channel. So now we're going to get more into the publishing side of Janice's journey, and if you could just kind of share a little bit about how being an author has has helped you to kind of lean on your faith a little bit, or how you've had to lean on your faith in your journey as an author.
Well, I honestly, it's an everyday leaning on my faith thing because I've only been at it for a year and a half of actually it's been a year and a half since I published my first book. Um, and, you know, I don't always know what I'm doing, but I just keep going and moving forward. Um, but I really use my faith because I mean, I want these books to get in the hands of the people who need it. Um, and so that's what I pray. I pray that God puts me on the minds of people that can distribute my books. And I pray that they get into the hands of kids that need to read that story and be encouraged, to get something out of it. Um, sometimes there's highs, sometimes there's lows, and you're the lows. I trust God that He's going to keep moving me forward with this, and I don't know where it's going. I can't even believe I'm on this journey, honestly. Um, but I'm doing it for a reason, and I'm just being obedient and writing, and just that's all I'm doing is just keep writing, and the Lord gives me ideas. Um, and I just keep putting the books out, and until he says stop, I'm gonna keep doing it. Um, but it's yeah, my I don't know if I could do everything that I do without strength from the Lord, because I work full time at a nonprofit, and um, it's, sometimes I come home and I'm tired, and I have to do Instagram posts, or, and it's like, oh Lord, I need some ideas. I don't know, it's, you just get a little weary sometimes, and because there's so many aspects to this, and I mean, I get my strength from him for sure, because I can't do it on my own at this point, and I haven't since I started. It's all been like my steps have been ordered to do this,
Mhm.
It's really an amazing thing to me.
I didn't really prepare you for this, but what would you say has been your biggest challenge as
Hmm.
an author or as a self-publisher?
Um, Marketing myself, I would say, because I'm a more behind the scenes with all of my jobs. I've been the coordinator, planning, um, I don't want to be up on the stage, and it's been a real stretch, because I've done a few interviews like this. I've spoken at a Rotary Club, and so it's a real stretch for me, and I have to just, prepare myself and just tell my story. And because to me, it's an incredible story, from how it even came, the whole Star That Lost Its Twinkle thing.
Mhm.
Um, it's, but that, I'm going on a little rabbit trail.
Go
Um,
for it.
yeah, but it's marketing is definitely the hardest part for me, because there's so many nowadays. It's all online, and you know, it's just tough. And you probably know what I mean, because of, you're a published author. Um, and even like walking into a bookstore and say, "Would you carry my books?" I have to really prepare for that one, because that is totally not my forte at all. Um, I need a marketer to just take over and do that for me. But it is, I'm learning a lot. Um, and it's been a good thing, but that's hard.
Sure.
Everything else is, you know, is fine. It's just, you get to that point where you got to market. It's like, oh Lord, help me! I can't. I don't know how to do this. But uh,
Is there anything that you have learned along the way, specifically in marketing your books, that has really helped you?
um, yeah, I go on Facebook groups and read, and there's a lot of great ideas on there. Um, I would say definitely get a subscription to Canva, um, because you can make incredible graphics, to put out there. Um, and I mean, just keep putting your book out there. I mean, even when you're not comfortable, like I took it to a small bookstore in a town close to me, and I was petrified, and I didn't know what I was doing. But I left 4 books, and people bought them, and I've got to go this week and bring them more. So you never know what doors are going to open, because of just having that faith to walk through the door, even when you're uncomfortable. I've donated books to, local libraries. I've given books to school libraries. I mean, I feel like I give away more than I sell sometimes, but it's important to get your name out there and get exposure. And so that's, that's what I do, is just, push it however I can.
Right. And because your books have a biblical focus, have you tried to sort of market them to Christian private schools and even like Sunday school classes and things like that at all?
No, I haven't. And it's mainly because of my time.
Hmm.
But that's on my to-do list. And I'm also um, planning, this is like on my list of things that I want to do with the books I've already written, is to come up with lesson plans for like Sunday school so that they can, and that's the children's ministry side of me coming out.
Yeah.
I'm like, with activities, and there's so much you can do with that. And I do have some people that have bought my books, and they run Christian preschools, or they donate it to their church children's ministry, and they use it. They read it at they read The Star That Lost Its Twinkle for a lesson at Christmas, and different things like that. So yeah, that's on my list to do, is just to sit down. And that's, I mean, if I had all the time in the world, it would already be done. But
Yeah.
that's my next focus, is to come up with like lesson plans for children's classes at church, um, to use.
Yeah, I think especially with your background in
Mhm.
children's ministry and even in journalism, being able to write those things and
Mhm.
that could really be a strength for promoting your books and
Sure.
offering those as like downloadable PDFs
Mhm.
on your website or wherever, and sort of use that as a book funnel for
Mhm.
your books, particularly. Really great information there, and I think it's something that we can all think about
Mhm.
how to promote to these different avenues. Do you have any last advice for first time authors?
I would say, and this is the advice that I got from my author friend. She said, read as many children's books as you can get your hands on. And then when you do that, just start writing. Just write. And your first draft is going to look a lot different than your final version. Um, but in the midst of all that writing, there's going to be something special that you can use. And it'll something will click, and you'll go a different direction, and then it'll all come together. It's just the dynamic of writing is so amazing. Sometimes it's like you just write, and then all of a sudden you're like, you get the idea, the spark, and then that takes off. um so I would just say, just write, just keep writing, don't give up on your dream. Gosh, I'm a grandmother, and I'm not calling myself Grandma Moses by any stretch, but but I wouldn't have been able to do this when I was younger. It's like all of these steps along the way that I stopped, and, you know, I wrote, and then I did the children's ministry, all of that compiled into preparing me to wanting to do this, to being able to do this. Um, and then being connected to my friend who showed me how to do this, that it was possible, because I didn't even know you could self-publish. That's how far removed I was from this whole process. And I was like, you do that yourself? And then she showed me how to do it, and it's been a game changer. I mean, it's it's a dream come true. And I just, I don't know. It's, to me, it's still surreal when I think I'm a published author of 4 books. I'm like, how did that happen? I don't even know. It's crazy.
Well, yeah. Well, I think it's really a beautiful story because you said you first thought of the first book uh, title or
Yeah,
premise. Was it 20 years ago?
over
Is that
20
what you
years
said?
ago.
Over 20 years ago, and you sort of sat on it, not really giving it much thought, but after 20 plus years, you finally took the leap
Hmm.
of faith and wrote the story. And just to see how that has developed for you, and you now have 4 children's books out. You are a multi-published author. Um, what's next for you?
Well, like I said, I mentioned earlier, I just published my 4th book last Friday. Um, and that's called The Second Chance Farm. I've got another book written. In fact, The Second Chance Farm jumped over this book that I have written, because that one's about baby Moses and that whole story.
Yeah,
But I've got to figure out a good way to bypass the whole drowning the babies in the Nile. I'm like, I don't know how well that would go over. So we'll see. If I can do that, then that'll be my next one. But I have a trusty iPad with notes on tons of stories. I just get random, you know. My daughters, my one daughter wants me to write one about Esther and dedicate it to her because she thinks she's the queen. I don't know. um, so I'm working, I'm just coming up with ideas. But the my 4th book, and I don't want to get into that too much because this is about the shepherd and the squirrel, but it's it's about the prodigal son. And it's really, I I I had the character because my brother-in-law is a farmer and he had a goat, a billy goat. And so he's like, you got to write a story about Rusty. And so I said, oh, okay, I'll think about it. So after a while, I came up with the prodigal son, and it to me it fit perfectly. And that's been it's just it's just fun to put these stories together. And if it blesses anybody, then it makes it all worth it to me. Um, but I'm just gonna keep writing and see where it goes.
very good, very good, and we're excited to see what the next stories are all about. Once again, the shepherd and the squirrel. You can find the link down in the description of this video, as well as the other books that Janice has out so far on Amazon. And so be sure to check those out and order some copies for your kids as well as your church library or school library. I think that would
Yes.
be great. Janice, thank you so much for being on the show. It was
Thank you. It
wonderful
was
talking to
nice
you.
to finally meet you in person,
Absolutely. Yeah.
kind of, sort of.
Thank you, everyone else, for watching, and I hope that you will subscribe to the channel and be looking for future episodes of the Coffee and Kidlit Show. And for now, I just want to say, write the book. Thanks, everyone.